2011, that's going to be the first stage, is a worldwide open competition open to anybody. And I have to say, there was a lot of pushback. A lot of people did not like that idea when it was first proposed. That online competition, who's going to want to do that? You're going to kill the community. People aren't going to be able to get together to compete. This is, just not going to be a good path. And in hindsight, it's easy to see how successful it was and continues to be. But at the time, with nothing to compare it to, it was like, maybe some of these people are right. Maybe we're taking a step that we shouldn't. But I think the proof is in the pudding. The first year we did it, I think we had 26,000 people sign up. And in 2018, that's the highest year to date. I think we had about 425,000 people.
Welcome to the Best Hour of Your Day podcast. This is your host, Felix, and in this podcast, I am interviewing CrossFitters and experts from around the world. I mean, I don't really need to introduce you. I think most of the people in the CrossFit realm, they know you and they know you for a long time, and the Open are right around the corner, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk about maybe some history, maybe how this thing developed over the time. And there are a lot of new people joining CrossFit, and especially in my box, there are like people who have never heard of CrossFit before when they start doing CrossFit. So they for sure don't know what the Open are and the history behind it. And I think this episode could be a very, very good opportunity to take them with us on the journey of the CrossFit Open.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny because I've been involved for so long now that it's easy to kind of assume that people they have that same kind of shared history, and that's not often the case. Like more and more so, it's the minority of people that have been involved for many years at this point. There's still plenty of us out there, but I think you're right. We have a lot more new people, and so it's a good reminder to me too that, hey, there's a lot of people that are still just getting started, and they don't know the ins and outs. They don't know where the Open came from or why it was so necessary. And in my opinion, why it's so funny that when it was first kind of conceived, people didn't like the idea before it happened. So it's kind of interesting. We can get into all of that.
So let's go back to the very start. I think the first year where the CrossFit Games happened, there were no CrossFit Open, right? It was
Correct.
Just like this signing up for the event at the ranch, and whoever showed up participated. And how did the Open start? What was the first year?
Well, so if we go all the way back to the history of the CrossFit Games, the games started in 2007, and it was a really small event at that point. Greg Glassman, the founder of CrossFit, and Dave Castro, who was the director of training at that point, they were at Dave's family ranch, and Greg said, hey, wouldn't it be great to do an event out here? We could do it like a Woodstock of fitness, I think was the term that's kind of been thrown around. And Dave said, let me think about it. And so they ended up having the first games in 2007 in the summer, and it was open to anybody that wanted to participate. CrossFit was very small at the time, so I think there were, I don't even know how many athletes, 50 or so athletes that signed up, and maybe 100 people that came to show up and support. And it was a couple of events over 2 days. There was a trail run through the hills. I think it was 7 kilometers. Then they had to do a rowing and push jerk workout, which was 135 pounds to 60 kilos for the guys. And that was like a heavy weight at the time, for reps. So it's kind of interesting just to see the progression of what's expected from the athletes. And then the next day they did a CrossFit total. So deadlift, squat, back squat, and overhead press. And they crowned the winner. So it was really a pretty small scale event, just in terms of everything, really. And it was an experiment. Nobody knew if that sort of thing was going to be something people wanted to compete in. And so by the next year, 2008, word had gotten out, and we had a ton of people that wanted to sign up at that point. That was the year that I got involved with the games. I'd been involved with CrossFit for a couple of years prior. But in 2008, I came to help out with the games and lead the judging for Dave. And so that year we had, again, open sign up. You just had to show up and sign up. And we had a lot more people. I think there were a few hundred that showed up in the second year to to participate. And again, there were 3 events on the first day, and we had kind of a rotating schedule. So it was interesting where you, the athlete, would show up. You had 3 things that you had to do that day. There were start times for each one of the events. And basically, you just had to check the box on each of them that you had done them. So the order, the time of day that you wanted to do them, as long as you slotted yourself into one of the available heats, you were good to go. So it was a lot more loose competition format than what we're used to today. And so once that concluded on Saturday, then on Sunday, Saturday night, we announced the final workout that was going to be performed on Sunday. And the whole competition format was built around every second counts. And there's a great documentary that by that same name that people can go check out that kind of follows some of the athletes through that year. But the competition format was all of the workouts had a combined total. So if you took 2 minutes on the first one and 3 minutes on the next one and another 3 minutes on the next one, that's 2 plus 3 plus 3. So you're looking at 8 minutes total time. And then the last workout was announced, and we basically started people in the reverse order based on their time for the day. So let's say you came into Sunday with a total time of 8 minutes and 1 second, and I had 8 minutes, you would get a 1 second deficit on me, meaning I would start at 0 and you would start at 1 second past 0. And we did that for all of the remaining competitors so that we knew whoever won that workout was going to win overall. And it was pretty exciting. So cool to play around with it.
That sounds a lot of fun when I think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so raw in the beginning,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, and it was very much like so many things in CrossFit. It wasn't established, and so there was a lot of flexibility and freedom to experiment with different formats. I mean, I still believe there are lots of opportunities like that, but there's also a couple decades of culture and certain norms that have established out of that, as they will with anything. And so you do start to see certain formats and certain things become more expected. But I think it's important to talk about those 2 years because there were no qualification systems. It was basically anybody that wanted to show up and could get there was eligible. And again, the formats were not very codified yet. So then in 2009, it was clear that there was enough popularity that we would not be able to host all of the athletes that wanted to sign up. It just wasn't going to be possible to host everybody based on the growth from 2007 to 2008. So the thinking was, all right, there needs to be a qualifying stage that allows different athletes from different parts of the world to come to the games, and that allows a set number of people, which if you've ever had to run an event and you don't know the number of people that are going to show up, it makes the logistics very difficult to try to pull off. So obviously there has to be a limit to that. So that was in 2009. Said, okay, we need a limit on the number of people. This is what we can support. How do we get to that number? All right, there's going to be some qualifiers. And so that was kind of the beginning of the regional system. So in 2009, there was a first stage of competition. These little competitions popped up locally. And I think there were, I don't even remember how many, like 12 or 17 of them, something like that. And from that, the best athletes out of those competitions were eligible to compete at the games. So that was 2009. Should keep going. What do you think here? Year by year?
Year by year sounds very, very, very good because I think a lot of people, including me, I started CrossFit around 2013.
Yep.
So before that, I mean, you probably heard of CrossFit and you've seen the documentary which you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really have this picture and you cannot really grab it what really happened there. So year by year is very good.
Okay. So yeah. So then 2009 was the first qualification system. We'll call it a regional just because the term is easy and it makes sense later. But in 2010, sorry. No, we're okay. My dog's just chewing on a shoe, but it's his shoe to chew on. I have a shoe that's like he's okay to.
It's a chewing
That's
shoe.
right. Yeah. So in 2010 it's kind of the same pattern. 2008, we said, whoa, there's a lot of people that want to sign up for this. How do we filter so that we can have a little more control over the competition? Okay, we get a qualifier. So 2010, we had the same problem. We had so many people that wanted to be part of these qualifiers that it's like, well, how do we filter further? So in 2010, there were 2 qualifying stages. The first was a smaller, more local competitions called sanctionals. And then the regionals were what you would qualify into. And then from the regionals, you were eligible to get to the games. So 3-step qualification process. And again, this is all trying to solve the problem that there were a lot of people that wanted to compete and only so many places to be able to compete. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, my dogs are restless here.
They're dogs. You have to entertain them.
I know, yeah, especially the puppy.
He gets bored. Yeah.
I took him for a giant snow walk this morning. I don't know why Anyway, so 2010, we had a 2-step qualification process. That was the first year that we were in Carson as well. That was a huge step up in terms of the venue. Honestly, I don't know that we were ready for it when we took that step. It was a big jump. But it worked out. That was kind of the birthplace of the modern era of the CrossFit Games, in my opinion. So cool to see it. So then 2011, this was kind of the question that we're grappling with, was like, okay, we're starting to carve out the games themselves as far as the format. And once we get to the big show, we know how to run a good competition. That's starting to become more evolved. But the qualification was still kind of tricky because it was clear that we had so many people that wanted to play, but only so many physical places to do that. And so looking at it through hindsight, it seems obvious we'll just go online and offer everybody an opportunity to do it. But at the time, that was a pretty radical idea. Nobody had done it before. Nobody had these online competitions. It was unheard of. And so that was the idea, was, okay, well, let's remove this first more local kind of sanctional competitions, because ultimately there could be hundreds of those. And that's what I think we see today. There are literally thousands of small-scale competitions being run around the globe. You look at any major kind of metropolitan area on any given weekend, and you can find a throwdown to go compete in, which is so cool. But at that time, it was like, okay, how could we meaningfully tie these together into a qualification system? And we just weren't prepared to do that. So, okay, an online qualifier. Let's experiment with that idea. Anybody with an internet connection and a willingness to sign up, pay the fee, they are eligible. And so we started playing with that idea. And, could we support it? What would have to happen for that to be the case? And so we put it out there that, all right, 2011, that's going to be the first stage, is a worldwide open competition open to anybody. And I have to say, there was a lot of pushback. A lot of people did not like that idea when it was first proposed. That online competition, who's going to want to do that? You're going to kill the community. People aren't going to be able to get together to compete. This is, just not going to be a good path. And
it's like always when you innovate something and you try something new, you always get a lot of pushback.
Yep. Yeah. And again, in hindsight, it's easy to see how successful it was and continues to be. But at the time, with nothing to compare it to, it was like, maybe some of these people are right. Maybe we're taking a step that we shouldn't. But I think the proof is in the pudding. The first year we did it, I think we had 26,000 people sign up. That was in 2011. And again, given the size of the community at that time, it was a pretty huge start. It was such a well-received start in terms of once we actually allowed people to register and do it, they did. That it crashed our ability to ingest scores. Like the leaderboard crashed. We had to extend it another week because we just weren't prepared for the volume. So it was a tough experience, I think, for that reason. But in my opinion, I think it's a big success when you have something that's beyond your expectations of popularity, and you have to deal with the problems with that. That's I'd much rather that than, hey, we put it out there and the critics were right. Nobody signed up.
Do you remember the first open workouts from 2011?
Yeah, there was.
Was it 5 at the time, or?
It was 5 weeks, and then it because the first week was such a disaster. Like I said, with all the people that signed up, they crashed the system. We had to extend the score submissions for another week, so it ended up being 6 weeks. The one and only 6-week open. But the first workout was, I believe it was snatches with the open barbell and double unders. So, again, pretty tame as far as what we've seen in more recent years, as far as loading and, complexity and things like that. But still, I mean, some of those workouts, they still hold up. They'll still challenge, I think, anybody if they apply themselves to them.
I mean, one of the most brutal workouts ever is the 7-minute AMRAP burpees, right? And it's just burpees.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was the start. So in that year, 2011, like I said, the Open kind of replaced these more regional qualifiers. The Open became the filter for the best athletes to progress to regionals. And again, I think we had a pretty big number that first year in 2011 of regional competitions. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to look it up. But I think it was 15 or 17 competitions that we had as regionals. And then the top athletes from there qualified to the games.
Do you remember who won the Open in 2011?
I don't. I don't remember who won the first Open. I bet you it was Rich, but I don't remember. And then on the women's side...
We'll look that up later.
Yeah, I want to say it was Sam Briggs, I think, that won it in
that might be true, yeah. I mean, that was like her prime years, right?
Yeah. And especially, Sam is such a tough athlete, always has been. I think that's right up her alley. Those kind of workouts where it's just put your head down and you don't know how well your competitors are doing. You just have to try to, outlast them. I think that's like right up her alley.
So 2011 was the start. What happened after 2011? Did the growth continue? I think so.
Yeah. So in 2011, we saw that, okay, this format has a lot of potential. And so now, just like with the other elements of the games, the question is, how can we refine it and make it better, make it more enjoyable for people, attract more people to it. And, at where CrossFit was at the time, it was still growing very fast. And people were really obviously interested in this sort of thing. So we had that on our side. And, we learned some things. 6 weeks was too much. So we decided, okay, we need to make sure that we are ready for this volume of people that we're expecting. So we beefed up some things there. And, we're still working a 5-week format, announcing something every week. But we started to look at how we formatted the scorecards and how the information was kind of communicated to the athletes around competing. And the videos that we made the first year, they weren't as exciting as they could have been. They weren't as clear as they could have been. So we started thinking, all right, how can we do that a little bit better? And so what we did was we started using prior champions to help us pre-record one of the open workouts that was coming up. And so Dave Castro, myself, and Heber Cannon, we did this whirlwind tour where we went to Cookeville to see Rich and his training camp at the time. I mean, this was before CrossFit Mayhem was a big deal. So Rich was still training at Tennessee Tech. So we went and filmed a workout there with him. And then we flew immediately to Iceland, caught a red eye to Iceland, got up, went to Annie's gym, filmed a workout with Annie and her crew, and then flew basically immediately back home to the United States. And then we went to Ohio and we filmed with Graham Holmberg, who was a 2010 champ. And then we flew immediately to Los Angeles and filmed with Chris Clever and Jason Kalipa. And so we did this whirlwind tour to capture all of these workouts. And then we released those as the announcement videos. And so that was the next year. And then, again, just kind of taking that theme and pushing it forward is like, well, what if we did this live? What if we revealed and kind of built up some hype around that? And so, Dave had that great idea to start this idea of the announcement show. And so that was when we started doing those. And then that kind of has carried us to where we are today, where we've gone through obviously different show formats and things like that, but the kind of cultural moment within the CrossFit community of starting the season with the Open, having an announcement that kicks off what those workouts are going to be, and then really trying to celebrate that within the affiliates. That's been a mainstay since, I guess, around 2013. So we're looking at about 10 or 11 years strong, give or take, for COVID, where that's the format.
Were there any major changes during this last 10 years? I mean, for sure, now we have 3 open workouts. We used to have 5 open workouts in the beginning, but do you have, or did you have any other significant changes?
Well, let's talk about that one first. So the 3-week versus 5 weeks. So there was a 5-week open for many years, and the 5-week open was pretty good. But what we noticed is that a lot of people wouldn't make it to the end. So a lot of people would sign up and they get through 2, 3, 4 weeks, but they might not submit a score towards the end. And we thought, okay, why might that be? We looked at it on the calendar and tried to put it in the framework of somebody who, they're just a fitness enthusiast. They work a job, they have a family, they want to participate in this thing. We're talking, a little bit over a month. That's a big commitment for somebody to stay excited about a competition. So we started thinking about that. And then on the other end too, we thought, okay, well, who has to facilitate this competition? Let's the affiliates. They're the ones that have to set up. They have to be really organized to make sure everybody can do the workouts in their class time, get their scores submitted, validate the scores through that affiliate validation process. And so we started looking at that and thought, okay, that's a pretty tall ask for them to have to facilitate this whole competition. And again, a little over a month, that's a lot of time. So what can we do to kind of ease that? And the question was, well, what significance does a few more workouts have on the outcome of the competition? We thought, okay, well, maybe we can shave this down and still preserve the outcome. And so that's when the experimentation started with how long does the Open really need to be.
What year did this change happen?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. It's more modern than you'd think, though. I think it was around 2019.
Yeah, I would say 2019, probably just 1 year prior to COVID, I think. Was there a major pushback as well from the community when you cut like 2 workouts off? I mean, I think about the real CrossFitters who, like, their life is CrossFit, and you steal 2 workouts away from them, and how did the community react?
I think we still have a lot of different opinions on that. There's definitely people that they love the 3-week Open for exactly the reasons I said. It helps to ensure people stay motivated a little bit more through those 3 weeks. Helps to be a little easier for the affiliates to implement. But yeah, you have the hardcore set that absolutely, they're like, man, bring it back. We need more workouts. We need more time, commit, do the whole thing. And I understand that. I mean, I get it. But I think especially now that we have the quarterfinals that happen so quickly after the Open, for those that want to and are at that level, the opportunity is kind of there. So I think that kind of takes a little bit of the edge off of that argument. And again, I still think for the average person and for the affiliates, a 3-week Open is a pretty good sweet spot. So yeah, definitely a lot of people had a lot of things to say when we first made that change, and you still have some mixed opinions, but I think that's always going to be the case.
Do you have some numbers for us to share? Like you said in the beginning, 26,000 people started in the first year. How did this number develop over the years?
Yeah, well, it was a pretty linear rocket ship to the peak year, which was 2018. So we had, I think, just over 26,000 people in year 1 in 2011. And in 2018, that's the highest year to date. I think we had about 425,000 people, somewhere right around there. So pretty significant increase year over year, steadily, from 26,000 to over 400,000 in 2018. Then in 2018, we had some really radical changes to the company structure. And I think that hurt a lot of people's enthusiasm for the competition and maybe their confidence in CrossFit, unfortunately. And so we had a dip in 2019. And then obviously 2020, we had some real serious problems with COVID, and a lot of gyms struggling, a lot of gyms closing. I know there's a lot of places that are still kind of dealing with the economic ramifications of that. So that was a really big decline year. And then obviously more changes within the company, et cetera. So the last couple of years, we've seen kind of some turbulent waters. But the good news is that we had a higher participation from 2022 to 2023. So we had just over 300,000 people in 23. And the expectation is that we should see that number climb again this year. The early registration numbers are looking really, really good. And it's pretty exciting to see it kind of climb back up after some years of, some kind of turbulence, a little difficulties there.
So last year you were responsible for programming the CrossFit Open. And
yep.
I love the workouts, to be very honest. One of my favorite ones was the burpee pull-up shuttle runs. I just loved it because I'm good at pull-ups and I'm not so good at running, but it was just like a shuttle run, so I could do it.
Yeah.
A
lot of people had a lot of things to say about that one.
Yeah, and
I feel there was no middle ground. You loved it or you hated it.
I saw a lot of like really good athletes struggling with this workout, and
sure.
You saw them like they got very slow at the end, right? That was pretty cool to see that even like the big guys they struggle with like a simple workout like that.
Yep.
So in terms of programming, you mentioned in the beginning it was obviously easier than it is today. So the weights developed, everything increased, the complexity of the movements increased. But can you describe a little bit the journey of the programming process for the CrossFit Open?
Yeah, I mean, for many years it was Dave. He was the I would say basically the sole programmer. To temper that, we always had a group of people that were working with him to develop the games, and so often they were his workouts, and then he would let a few people in early. I mean, we're talking a very small group. There'd be like maybe 4 or 5 people that knew, and they would just give a little bit of feedback and help to craft some of them. But for the most part, I mean, it was pretty much exclusively Dave for many years. And then, as the season structure progressed and it was more and more to program the Open and then regionals and then the games and then team competition on top of that, and as the Masters started to develop on top of that, Dave began to delegate some of those responsibilities out. Or at least, if not delegate them, he would bounce ideas off of us earlier and a little bit more frequently. So for things that he wanted to continue to program, things like the Open, the regionals, the games, for the individuals, they were really close to his chest. And he was almost exclusively responsible for all of that. But for other divisions like the teams and the age groupers, he started to rely more and more on some of the other staff that were close at the time. So fast forward to, more recently, 2022, Dave unfortunately got fired. He's back now, which is great. And so the responsibility fell on me to work through the Open and all the stages of the season. So I got to do the Open last year. I'm sorry, 23. Yeah, 23 Open. And this year it's really fun because we are collaborating nicely. You know what I mean? Like Dave's got a really heavy hand in it. So do I. And so it's kind of fun to see his perspective and my perspective. And, Dave and I have always had a really good working relationship. Like we can agree when it's time to agree. We can argue like crazy. We're not afraid to push each other, pretty hard. I think if people don't know the depth of our relationship, sometimes they can see that interaction and be like, whoa, you guys are really, being harsh or whatever. But, we just have a lot of history. And we know that we can be pretty honest with each other. So it's, I love it. I think it's working out really well.
So the cool thing about the CrossFit Open is there's usually a repeat workout every year. I don't know if there's every year.
Not every year.
Not every year, but like
a lot of years. Yeah.
Most of the years there's like a repeat workout. I think there was a repeat workout last year as well.
The first one.
Yeah. One of my favorites.
I like that one a lot too, yeah.
That was really like a very, very tough battle at the end.
Yeah, for sure. I like workouts like that a lot too. This is, for those that really want to psychoanalyze what I'm about to say here and see if they can make some predictions. This is the moment right here. This is the soundbite. But I really like workouts that allow people to start, but only the best can finish. I think there's something really cool to that, where it's like, okay, we can all start, we can all get a good workout into a point, but only the best of us are either going to make the time cap or be able to do the skills or the loads at the end, and that becomes the separator. I think that's a cool way to play.
I think you're not allowed to talk about the open workouts yet. I think they're already programmed, but maybe can you give us a little hint about something that might show up? Will there be a repeat?
I won't give you any hints because I don't think that you guys really want them. People want to be surprised. It's more fun that way. But what I will say is that this year we've really taken a look at how we can make things easier to uptake. I think last year and the year prior, we really focused a lot on specificity around floor plans and layouts and expectations from kind of the higher end of the athletes. And I think by extension of that, some of our materials got really, really extended. You look at the average scorecard and they were really long documents.
I had to print them all, right? So my printer ran out of paper because I had to print 300,000 pages.
Yeah, exactly. And so the danger with that, it's nice to be thorough, but at the same time, the danger is that if you have a document that's too long or too involved, people just don't read it at all. And that's not helpful. So we've really taken a look at how can we get the information to people so that they can compete and everybody's playing by the same rules, but in the most succinct way possible. And also, how can we minimize requirements for floor plans and things like that? And so we've really eliminated a lot of things that had kind of built up over the years into something that on their own maybe weren't that difficult to implement, but when you take them in combination with so many of these things, they'd built up to something that became, more work than it needed to be. We'll put it that way. And so this year that was like a huge focus was, okay, how can we still make cool workouts that people want to do, that are going to test everybody, but we're going to implement them in a way that you don't have to worry about, will I have the equipment or not? It's like, yes, you will. If you do CrossFit, you'll have the equipment. How am I going to worry about, can I pull this off in the space that I have? And the answer is yes, you'll be able to do it. I have a small garage that I work out of as my office. And part of the litmus for me this year was okay, could I do every single thing here? And the answer has to be yes. So, maybe people can read into that a little bit too.
So the focus was, there won't be a 50-meter handstand walk, probably.
Well, you never know. What's the breakup of the distance? but really, the idea was, okay, how can we make this as streamlined as possible without losing, the competition integrity?
So when we talk about the movements, they're I think it was 2017 when the dumbbell was first introduced to the CrossFit Open. 17.1, I think, was the dumbbell snatches and burpee box jump overs.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah, I remember that because it was one of the workouts that hurt my back so bad that I couldn't walk for weeks because I never did a dumbbell snatch before and I didn't know how to pull this thing off the ground. So I just lifted it in a way that you're not supposed to lift a dumbbell.
Just stiff legs and just rip that spine. Yeah. Why not?
Rip it and grip it. But not only new movements have been involved in the CrossFit Open, but also movement standards. So we saw some standards for the burpee over bars, where in one year you had to jump with both feet, then it didn't really matter. Then you had the box jump step down rule. And what's the reason for the changes in the movement standards?
Yeah, a lot of the time it has to do with trying to simplify. And so, what people don't often see is what happens at scale. So it's one thing to take a look at a movement and say, well, I understand that and I can do it and it makes sense to me, as a single athlete. But when you take a couple 100,000 people and not all of them are going to speak the same language and not all of them are going to have a lot of experience, the interpretations of what you get can come back a little bit different than what you expected. And so you look at something like a burpee over the bar, for example, and something as simple as okay, it's got to be a 2-foot takeoff. Well, all of a sudden, when you throw a couple 100,000 people on that, it can start to raise a lot of questions. Well, is that a 2-foot takeoff with the feet in the same plane? Is that a 2-foot takeoff with a 2-foot landing? Is that a 2-foot takeoff, but I can effectively, land any way I want? There's a lot of things that can happen within that require you to either A, be more and more and more specific, which we've experimented with that, right? And what that does is allows more and more things to find their way into the rule book or the standards. And then you have to have more and more people looking to police those things. Or you can go the other way and say, okay, well, maybe we don't care about that as much as we thought we did, and we eliminate it and just allow people to do what they will, and work that way. And we've experimented with that as well. So you've seen that with a few different movements. You've seen that with burpee box jump over, or burpees over the bar, I think is a really good example of that, where you see, some experimentation back and forth to see what works best at scale. And handstand push-ups obviously have gone through a ton of different variations, and people criticize that, which, fair enough. But yeah, ultimately what we're trying to do is balance between a strict enough rule set that everybody's doing the same thing, but not so, I don't know what the word would be, verbose, I guess, that you have to spend 20 minutes reading a document to do a movement that you do almost weekly in training. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's usually what I like when it's very simple. You just tell the people to do it, and they do it, and they understand it, and you don't have like 20 different possibilities to do it. You just have one, and you just do it, right? And that's what I, as a coach, especially what I like, because it's simple, right? And simple is good.
Yep.
And so, but a lot of people, they ask this question, what's the movement standard this year? Why did it change again? And I think this question really nicely answered the question. So everyone now doesn't need to complain. You just do it because it's
All right.
easier.
We solved it. There'll be no complaining in the Open this year. That's it. It's over. But one thing I'll say about that too, I understand people just want to, they want to train in a way that's going to prepare them, and they want to know that, what they're doing is going to count in competition. I get it. The one thing I will say on that too, that I think is important as CrossFit's grown, and I think we've talked about this in the past, but just kind of philosophically, if you are really, really good at the basics, meaning you've done burpees with a couple of different standards and you understand the movement, and that goes for any of the basic CrossFit staples, it shouldn't be a problem for you to modify slightly based on a standard that, pops up or doesn't pop up. And I think that it's not just going to happen in the Open. We have a very decentralized competition network. You look at these competitions I was talking about where they're outside the games track. We're not talking about a regionals competition or a semifinal or something like that. We're talking about the local level where these different competitions happen. Most of them will adopt standards that they've seen at other places, but inevitably there'll be something unique that happens even in these local level competitions where you have to adapt and you have to take what they are telling you and perform on that day in that way. And to me, I think that that's important. Now, it shouldn't be so chaotic that you show up and you can't expect some of the staples. It's like, you're always going to squat below parallel. I think that's a given. But whether or not they allow, let's say we have a front squat, whether or not they allow the hands to slip off the bar or to hold the bar with a crossed arm position, things like that. If you're comfortable with those basics, you should be able to adapt on the fly. And if you have really strong fundamentals, it's not going to be a problem for you. And so that's what I keep coming back to is, we train for variance. And so if you think that you can just out-train the system by specifically only performing movements in specific ways, I think you're missing some of the point and some of the beauty of being able to be resilient with that. So that's what I would encourage athletes to do is, don't get too hung up on, okay, you have your pet way that you like to do things. That's great. But I bet you that with 1 or 2 minutes of thinking about it, you're going to be just fine regardless of what that standard is.
When we look at athlete development during the last 12 years, would you say that 2011 winner of the CrossFit Open would now still be able to compete maybe in the top 20
I think the fun of the Open is that you do get that. That's still like direct comparison to past athletes. People that you've trained with in the past that maybe have moved to different gyms or across the world or whatever. Selfishly for me, I love it because I had the good fortune to travel all over through CrossFit. And so, there's lots of friends that I've made all over that I don't get to see even on a yearly basis, but we get to catch up with the Open. We get to talk smack to each other and, see how we stack up. So it's good.
Cute little puppies.
Oh, they're savages. Okay. Anyway.
I mean, we are live, right? That's the beauty of podcasting. You never know what happens. So
yeah. You guys get the entertainment of my dogs about to engage in a grudge match here.
Everyone will remember this episode because there was a lot of dogs involved.
Oh, man. Yeah. They usually have a little bit more freedom, but with all the snow and the cold, they're stuck in the garage with me today. So
that's okay. I mean,
yeah.
So what would you tell someone who is pretty new to CrossFit and who doesn't really want to compete, and maybe it's the first year Open for him or for her, and what would you tell a person like that? Because we have a lot of those people inside the CrossFit box, and they're just there to get fit, but maybe it's still a pretty cool way to see how you get fitter over time. Because when I think about myself, when I started, I didn't really know what the Open were. I didn't sign up for the first year. And now 10 years later, I'm really sad that I didn't sign up for the first year, because now I could see how my athletic capacity would have evolved, and now I'm missing 1 or 2 years. So
there's definitely going to be some people that if they fall in love with CrossFit like you and I have, and they continue to come back year after year, you will have that moment where you're like, I wish I would have had my numbers on the board, because the leaderboard, you can look back to every year that you've participated. I think that's really cool. But more importantly than that, I think, CrossFit, again, if we get back to the spirit of it, it's about tackling things that you weren't sure that you could do and sticking with it until you make some progress. And that's the really cool thing about it, is that you're surrounded by a group of people that want that for you. There's a whole community that, whether you're in the affiliate or you are part of somebody's online programming or you just follow the main site, there's a group of people with you that want the same thing, and they're there to support that. And I think that's really cool. So much of the world these days is pretty cynical, which I think is, cheap and not a great way to approach life. And so I think it's rare to find a huge group of people that are motivated to better themselves, and not only better themselves, but to try to bring up other people as they do it. And that, to me, is what the spirit of the Open is about. Yeah, it's a competition, but it done at its best, it brings out those elements of competition that are so healthy. And so that's why I think it's a great thing to throw your hat in the ring and do. And for the average person at the average affiliate, I mean, it's what you do on a daily basis anyway. You do workouts that are going to be challenging. You engage with movements that maybe you haven't mastered quite yet. And your coaches are going to be there, and the people that you work out with every day are going to help and support you through that. It's no different. There's just a little bit more on the line psychologically maybe, but at the end of the day, you've been there hundreds of times in the past. So don't shy away from it. It's a good time.
I really miss the row versus Boz. Will there be like a debut of it? Will you come back one day and compete against Rory McKernan?
It's funny. We live a lot closer together these days than we have. There were a couple years there where he moved across the country, and then I kind of followed him to a pretty close location. So we're only about an hour away from each other right now. And so it is possible, but I don't know. He's a lot fitter than I am at this point. So it might be pretty one-sided, but I'm open to it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It was always like one of the most terrifying moments of the year for me, but it was always a blast too.
And it was always fun to watch. So I would really love to see you both back on the competition floor.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And it was fun to kind of represent the, I don't know about average, because, we're pretty experienced. I'm not like a top level athlete, but I do okay. Or at least I have in the past when I've been more fit. But it was always kind of fun to represent the more normal person. You see some of these superstars attack these workouts and you get it in your head. You're like, oh, I'll just do it unbroken. Why wouldn't I just get that same score relatively? And then you start the workout and you realize, oh yeah, they're superhuman. So it was always fun to kind of represent the more normal person.
And I think that's what the people want to see, right? So they want to see the superstars, but they want to see like the normal persons side to side. So you see them suffer, and it entertains me when I see people suffer. So
happy to be that entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a very fun time, the Open, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I can't wait to see the announcement videos. And I'm really excited for the workouts. I'm really in a very bad fitness shape, I would say. So usually I'm like a little bit competitive. So I want to beat my scores from last year. But I don't think I can do that this year. But I mean, in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just be there, just do it, just compete with yourself and have a lot of fun. And that's the spirit of CrossFit.
Absolutely. And I'll also say too, this is perspective of getting a little older now and having been in the game, so to speak, for a little bit longer is, I think it matters to just be consistent. So maybe you're not at your best this year, but how many years have you been doing it?
A lot of years.
There you go. So, I mean, the fact that you're still there, still putting in the time, I think that's worth something. And like I said, the older I get, I think the more value I put on that, hey, not every year may be your best year, but the fact that you're still doing it and you're still compelled to push the limits and stay consistent, I think that is something to be celebrated. So for those of us out there that have some miles under us, there's lots of ways to win, so to speak.
Boz, thanks again for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm, as I said, really sad that we don't see each other in Stockholm, but maybe in London in October. And maybe we can wrap up the CrossFit Games by then.
Yeah, man, that sounds great. I hope we have that opportunity. And thank you as always for having me. I always really appreciate our chat. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Sounds good.
If you like this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. See you next time.